Hey, this is Chidua, the host of Out of Ashes Show, broadcasting live each week on Saturday at 6 p.m. Central from Fish Bowl Radio Network Studios. Log on to hear topics that will empower you to create the life that you have been destined to live. You will be taught on how to come out of the ruins of the past, mistakes that you have made that make it seem like you cannot live a happy life. So be sure to log on each week on Saturday at 6 p.m. Central to catch Out of Ashes Show. Hello, and welcome to today's edition of Out of Ashes Show on the Fishbowl Radio Network with your host, Chidua. And today I have a guest with me, and he is Reverend Dr. George Okafor. He's a counselor, anger management specialist, conflict resolution administrator, and of course, an author. He has authored the book titled Conflict Resolution and Marital Prayers. So Reverend Dr. George is here with me today to discuss the topic, conflict in relationships. Hi, Dr. George. Would you please say hi to the audience?
Hello, audience. I'm glad to be on the show with you all. And thank you, Mr. Chidua, for inviting me.
Excellent. So today, like I said, we will be talking on conflict in relationships because, we are human beings, right? Yeah. And we are social creatures. Exactly. So there is a saying that no man is an island.
Yep.
So we need one another. You cannot self-exist because we were not created to self-exist. However, as we get into relationships, we bump heads, because we're coming from different backgrounds, different upbringings. Sometimes we have different core values. And then we get into relationship because of certain attractions. There are certain things that will attract a man to a woman and certain things that will attract a woman to a man. And they choose to be in a relationship. However, certain experiences, especially negative childhood experiences that have been embedded in the subconscious and were not dealt with. So people grow up with soul wounds that they are not even aware of. And they go into relationships not knowing that there are certain things about their past that they should have dealt with. Then these things begin to show up. And because they lack the necessary skills, things like not being validated as a child, physical, verbal abuse, and abandonment, and then what else? Emotional abuse. So sometimes these things cause trauma in a child, right? I mean, as a specialist, you've probably experienced those with the people that you counsel. Yeah. So these things show up and then in relationships and begin to cause conflict. So let's take something like verbal abuse. Let's take something like not feeling validated as a child. You were not validated as a child. How can that cause conflict in a relationship as an adult?
Yeah, someone that has some challenges, let me just put them all in a nutshell. Some challenges growing up, which includes all the things you've mentioned. If those are not tackled effectively when the child is growing up, and when even sometimes adults experience some of those at one point or the other. And if they do not effectively tackle them, they grow up with them. And sometimes they carry them into their relationship. And in most cases, it does not yield a positive result in the relationship. And when the relationship metamorphosizes into marriage, it even becomes worse. So it is better to tackle it at the egg stage, quote unquote, egg stage, before the child grows up and becomes an adult.
Okay, excellent. So what I'm understanding from what you're saying is that if you were, perhaps you're watching or you're listening and you felt or you didn't feel like you were validated as a child, you probably were that child that nobody took you seriously, you felt that your voice was never heard. Now you are in a relationship and you have a perceived threat that, you know, your partner is not listening to you, so you feel threatened. It makes you feel insecure. So if someone is in the kind of relationship right now, what would be a good way for them to handle it? Because conflict is really not bad on its own. Mm-hmm. What is bad is the battle. Like, you know, when you have a conflict, how do you resolve it? Because sometimes conflicts are needed, right, to make a relationship stronger. But with this kind of feeling and not having the necessary tools with which to deal with it, so how can it now take the relationship into a negative path instead of strengthening it? So perhaps, like I said, you know, someone is feeling that right now they felt they were not validated as a child, and this is showing up in their relationship. So what advice would you give them as a counselor? How would you encourage them or counsel them so that they can flip it around to a place where the relationship can begin to thrive?
Thank you. Generally, it's not where we're coming from that really matters in relationship, but where we're going to. That in most cases, that we're not well groomed socially, which entails or involves everything that you've mentioned. That does not mean that we could not turn it around for good. So if we're having that negative effect of upbringing, the best way to handle it is to look focused to where we're going and what we want to achieve, rather than what we have felt in the past. So I would say, behold, old things are passed away, and all things are become new. So when we leave the past behind and focus on where we're going, focus on our current relationship, rather than focusing on what mommy did 20 years ago, 15 years ago, or 18 years ago, focusing on what daddy or auntie or uncle did, bringing the blame game into the relationship. That mommy didn't bring me up good, that daddy didn't bring me up good, therefore what I'm doing right now is not my fault. Pushing the fault to someone else. I don't think that would work in any relationship, because what counts is what you as a person is doing right now. So the advice is, leave the past behind and focus on the future, because nobody can change one's future than that person, with the help of God, though.
Absolutely.
So if we keep the blame game and not move forward, then that will keep the person in what I call left, right, left, right, left, right, without a forward march. Thank you.
Wow, absolutely. I like what you said, because, you know, in one of the sessions I had, I talked about the blame, shame, and guilt mindset. And I also spoke that your past should not define you, that you may have made mistakes or some things may have been done to you these are things that were done or things that you did. It's not you. There is a difference between what I did and who I am.
Yep.
So just like you said, when we play the blame game, what we do is we absolve ourselves of the responsibility.
There you go.
When you absolve yourself of responsibility, you are pushing it onto someone. So which means you don't think that you need to change.
There you go.
So you're looking at the other person to change. However, you're still dealing with the wounds that have come from the past. And the sad thing is that a lot of relationships that could have been worked out, but because people are not looking into themselves, or because we are not looking into self, we're looking at the other person.
Yep.
Now, we move from relationships to others, and we're still not taking with us the tools. So we go into relationships, those wounds come up again. And then at the end of the day, what do? You spend your days lonely, isolated, and then bitter and resentful of everyone, which shouldn't be. Absolutely, absolutely. And then the past is powerful, but it should be as the past is supposed to be there to guide us,
Yes.
so that we don't make the same mistakes. So you may have gone through negative experiences as a child, and you probably did not acquire the social skills that would help you navigate through life. If that is where you are right now, there is still hope for you.
Yep.
Because when we come back from a break, Reverend Dr. George will give you tools or advice on what you can do so that you can acquire the necessary skills that would help you navigate through your relationship. If not feeling validated is one of the causes of conflict in your current relationship. So don't go away. We'll be back. Welcome back to Out of Ashes Show on the Fishbowl Radio Network with your host, Chidua, here at the Globe Life Park in Arlington, Texas. And with me in the studio today is Reverend Dr. George Okafor, who is a specialist in anger management and conflict resolution, especially in relationships. And today, Dr. George and I are discussing the issue of conflict in relationship. And we are saying that conflict is really not bad, but it's how you handle it. Because conflict can turn a struggling relationship into a strong one. But if you lack the tools growing up, maybe because you had a negative childhood and you were not taught or equipped with the necessary tools to handle relationships, because most of our experiences as adults stem from the things that we went through as children. Am I right, Dr. George? And then we did say that, before we went on the break, Reverend Dr. George did explain to us how not feeling validated can affect or cause conflict in relationships. I was taking notes, because I'm also learning. And one of the things he said is that you passed the buck. It's not my fault. That the events of your past can cause you to always point the finger at someone. It's not if you did this, if you had done that, and what happens, instead of you accepting your own, taking accountability on yourself, you're blaming someone, and that can further tear down a relationship. So what about something like verbal and physical abuse? If someone growing up went through a series of verbal abuse by the primary caregivers, in which case will be the parents, grandparents, siblings. So how can that cause conflict in relationships? And when we talk about relationship, it could be because there are different types of relationships, right?
Of course.
You have relationship with your coworkers, with your superiors, supervisors, subordinates, church members, your neighbors, but it can also affect a relationship intimacy, like you said earlier, that could lead into marriage. So how can, having gone through physical and verbal abuse as a child, how can that cause conflict in relationships in adults?
Wow, that could cause tremendous conflicts in relationships. Someone growing up and being abused and sees abuse as the order of the day, being caused at all the time. Like when daddy want to say, go get this, then he will call the child a name that is not his name, an ugly name, and say, go get me so step. Then that child will grow up thinking that's the way to address somebody. Then when that child gets into relationship, that person will be addressing his or her partner the same way, because that's the norm to him, because that's the way he or she was raised. I remember a show, I don't want to mention the name of the show, that though it's a show, but that's reality that they're talking about. That the father in the show, it's a TV show, family TV show, always calls the son a negative name. And the son said that, was telling one of his friends in the show, in the same show, that he grew up thinking that that was his name till when he became matured mentally. Because there are two maturities, two types of maturity. One is growing up in age, another is growing up
In
mentally,
wisdom.
in wisdom and everything. So he said when he grew up, then he understood that that name is not his real name. And some of us watching and listening to this already know who that is. But what I'm saying in effect is that when children start listening to what their parents are calling them, are saying, or when they start seeing what they are doing, they think it's the normal way to do things, because that's the only way they know. Then when they grow up, guess what? You sure guess right. They're going to start exhibiting what mommy and daddy taught them. So I believe that answers.
Absolutely, because Reverend, they say that, not even they say, we do know that behaviors are modeled.
There you
So
go, yeah.
growing up, And who do we learn in those formative years of our lives? It's what dad and mom do that to us are the truth. So that's
Exactly.
why as parents and as adults, we have to be careful the behavior that we model because we're supposed to be role models. But if
Exactly.
you are listening and watching us and you grew up in an environment where the words that were always used on you, or maybe mom, dad, mom, were negative, remember that you do not have to be defined by your past. If you want the trajectory of your life to change, you have to change certain things.
Yes.
You may not have had positive adults that modeled the right behavior. And these things, like Reverend Dr. George just said, are showing up in your relationship because you think that the way to address your partner when you're frustrated is to yell at them because that was what you saw. That was the behavior that was modeled to you as a child. Or when someone gets angry, they call you out. They call you a negative name, like Reverend George said. And now you are using that same format in your relationship and not getting the results that you want. So what if someone is in that kind of relationship right now and they don't know what to do? What would be, since the message of this show is that you do not have to live in ashes. You can change your life. You can rewrite your story. So if someone is going through that kind of situation right now, what are the tools or what are the ways, or maybe just one solid way that they can change the way they address their partner that can help rebuild the trust and strengthen their relationship?
Thank you. That's a good question, and that's a good one that can really help relationships. First of all, is what I call the okay. Let me not give it that name. Now, let me explain it. I think that would be better in explanation. Before we say something to somebody or do something to somebody, let's first take a break and think within ourselves. If this is done to me, if this is said to me, how would I feel? Then that will make us know how to relate it to somebody. Because if we know it will make us mad, then we know that definitely it will make the person we are about to say it to equally mad. If we know that if we do it to that person, that it will offend that person, or let me put it the other way around. If we know that if someone does that to us, it will offend us, then let's not do it to somebody either, because it will equally offend the person. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, great. So what you're saying is that we should always process our thoughts
Yeah.
and filter our words.
Yeah.
So that way we do not cause problems
Yeah.
that would, because, they say that a hurting person hurts people.
Yeah.
Because you were hurt as a child, now you have soul wounds that are not being healed, and that will now begin to show up in relationships. So we
Yeah.
need to process our thoughts
Yeah.
and also filter our words. So
Exactly.
if you know that if something is said to you, it will hurt you, then believe that those same words will hurt somebody else.
Yeah.
So if we will adopt this advice from Dr. George, I think it will help us begin to rebuild our relationships.
Exactly.
We will take another short break and we'll be right back.
Thank you.
So when we come. Welcome back to today's session of Out of Ashes show on the Fishbowl Radio Network here at the Globe Life Park, Arlington, Texas. And this is your host, Chidua. And with me in the studio today is Reverend Dr. George Okafor. And we are here to talk about conflicts in relationship because Reverend Dr. George is actually a specialist in conflict resolution and what?
Anger
And anger management. Thank you very much. And Dr. George authored the book titled Marriage Counseling. It's a marriage counseling book, conflict resolution. I hope you can see it. And marital prayers. Because we do need prayers, you know. Everything about life should be based on prayers because we can't do it on our own.
Yeah.
Okay, but yes, the book does say conflict resolution and marital prayers. And you might be thinking, oh, but I'm not married. So this book or today's show is for married couples. No, my answer is no. Marriage is a relationship. And before it went into marriage, it started as a relationship.
There you go.
So we are, like I said at the beginning, we are social creatures. We cannot exist alone. So your relationship right now may be with your sibling. It's still the same
principle.
skills or principles that you need. So whether it's a marital relationship with your siblings, co-workers, it's still the same principles that apply. So if you would, before the show ends, Reverend George will tell us where we can get a copy of the book so that you can use it to develop the skills that would help you navigate through relationships. Okay, so we will talk about the book again before the show ends. But Reverend, I was looking at your book in chapter 3. In chapter 3 of this book, Conflict Resolution and Marital Prayers, you mention anger as one of the major causes of conflict in relationships. Yeah. So can you expand on that? How does that happen? How can that affect a relationship? How does it show up?
Yeah. In expatiation of that, anger is not a good thing per se, but in anger, you see, it's not the anger itself that matters, but what we do with the anger. Mm-hmm. That's why the book of Ephesians tells us to be angry, but sin not. Now, if we carry one anger, maybe the anger that we got from growing up, what mommy did, what daddy did, and take it into relationship, it will hurt the relationship. If we carry one anger from one relationship to another relationship, it will hurt that new relationship. And if we have the pre notion that all, maybe if a female already hurt a man, then man said that all females are like that, or vice versa. It wouldn't work like that when they take it into that new relationship. So like I said at the beginning of the show, that all things should be kept back, and behold, let all things become new.
So this just boils down to developing new mindset, because I talk about all the time that if you want to change the trajectory of your life, then you have to drop certain habits and pick up new ones. So what if you know that the things you are doing, your daily habits, which come from your thoughts, are hurting your relationship, then the time has come for you to do a check and then look at those things that are causing you to think the way you are thinking, causing you to act the way you are acting. Then know that, okay, that's when to draw the line and begin to develop new skills that would help you navigate through life. You also mentioned low self-esteem, which can also come from not feeling validated or verbal abuse, because sometimes children grow up feeling inferior because parents never made them feel valued. So they now go into relationships with this feeling of inferiority. How can this lead to a problem in a relationship?
If someone, for example, thinks that he or she cannot make it, that he or she is nobody, and grows up with that notion, with that perception, and then starts exhibiting it in the relationship. Now, if, for example, if it's a man and he goes into the relationship and thinking that, okay, he cannot have a car, while the wife, for example, or the girlfriend, or whoever he is in relationship
Significant other.
with, and it can be the other way around, thinks that he can and is encouraging him, and he himself actually can do it, but because of that notion that he cannot, because the Bible tells us that as a man thinks, so is he. So if he thinks that he cannot, then that will be affecting his mind, thought, and his pattern, which will transmit it into his behavior. Then he will be acting that he cannot. Hence, he cannot or will not be able to purchase the car. Then the partner, which is the person he is in relationship with, or if it's the other way, the person that she is in relationship with will start, getting frustrated about it in most cases, and that could cause conflict. And majority of the times when they come to counseling, they don't really say it the way it is. They'll be going round and round and round because they will be ashamed to say exactly what it is. But it's just like someone going to the doctor and not telling the doctor what the problem is. Then how can the doctor diagnose the problem effectively? Because it is not everything most of the times that could be picked up.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a very good, because we can, there's so much that we could say regarding this conflict in relationships, how they start and how far it can lead in damaging a relationship. But because of time, we're just going to wrap it up. But there is a quote, Dr. Joe, that says, conflict in a relationship is not victory or defeat. It's reaching understanding and letting go of our need to be right. Because we are coming from a place of needfulness or neediness. Now we now think that our needs are not being met. So you constantly prejudge your significant other, and because of that, you misinterpret and misunderstand even their best intentions. And these are some of the things that leads to conflict in relationships. So in closing, what would be another advice that you can give, and then you can tell those that are watching and listening where they can get a copy of the book, because I do believe it's in Amazon, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'll let you give a word of advice before then we'll wrap up.
Yeah. I'm going to take it in a general nutshell. It is not advisable, or I wouldn't advise, for anyone to carry a pre-notion into a relationship. I will advise that someone goes into a new relationship based on who you are meeting, not who you met, not what happened to you with the other person, not how you were brought up, not what mommy or daddy or whoever did. Go into a new relationship with a new ball game.
No mindset.
With a new mindset. Let's not use one type of brush to paint the whole picture.
Wow.
Because it wouldn't fit.
It wouldn't look good.
It wouldn't look good.
Absolutely.
So each picture has its own size. Therefore, it should have its own size of brush.
Absolutely. So where can they get a copy of the book?
Yeah, the book could be gotten from Amazon.com, and you can go to the Christ the King website, which is www.christistheking.org. christistheking.org. And you can get it from there also.
Absolutely. So I hope you've learned one or two nuggets and that can help you. If not now, maybe you're in a relationship that is thriving. Thank God for that. But you may know someone that is having constant conflict in the relationship. So I believe that today you have learned something that can help you help someone else so that they can have a thriving relationship and live the fulfilled life that God has called you to live. So thank you so much for being with us today on Out of Ashes Show on the Fishbowl Radio Network here on the Globe Life Park, Arlington, Texas, with your host, Chidua. Join me again on Saturday, every Saturday, 3 p.m., next Saturday at 3 p.m. for another inspiring topic on Out of Ashes Show. Until then, you have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Hey, this is Chidua, the host of Out of Ashes Show, broadcasting live each week on Saturday at 6 p.m. Central from